him. 3 new amendments introduced to the proposed 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Upcoming week crucial to suppress COVID-19. Warnings from a number of authorities. Do not violate government regulations by convening Parliament. Postpone the debate on the 20th Amendment. A request from the Chief Opposition Whip. Venerable Madagoda Abetisathera issues a warning.
A very good evening and welcome to Primetime News on TV1. I'm Jayamal Ratnayake for the Newsfirst team. On to those stories in detail. Former Minister Rishad Badiuddin, who was arrested this morning by officials of the CID, was remanded until the 27th of this month.
According to our correspondent, 7 others were also remanded for harbouring the former minister. The arrested group, including former Minister Rishad Badiuddin, was produced before Fort Chief Magistrate Priyantha Liyanage this afternoon. He has been charged under the Misappropriation of Public Funds and Public Property Act for allegedly transporting displaced people from Puttalam to Mannar in order to cast votes using state funds during election season. President's Counsel Anuja Premaratna, appearing for former Minister Badiuddin, said that the money had been spent with the approval of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance and the Elections Commission, adhering to standard procedure. However, Deputy Solicitor General Kuliyapitiya pointed out that the approval to spend the funds had been obtained 2 days prior to the election, further questioning as to how funds were allocated within 2 days to obtain 222 buses. Additional Solicitor General Kuliyapitiya also reported to court that the suspected former minister had been brought close to the magistrate's official residence without notifying the media. The Fort Magistrate had then ordered for the matter to be investigated and reported to court.
Former Minister Rishad Badiuddin was arrested by CID officials early this morning at a private apartment complex situated in Ebenezer, Dehiwala.
සුදු පාට දවස් කීයක් හිටියද මේකේ සාමාන්‍ය මට දන්නවා මුන්කින් 4 දවස් 4යි ඒක තමයි ඩියුටි කරන්නේ ඔව් මම දවස් 4ම හිටියලා ආවිල්ලා නේ මේ රිෂාඩ් බදුරි මේ රිෂාඩ් බදුරි මට දන්නේ මම අතර යන මම දැක්කේ නැහැ
Investigations for the arrest began on the 13th. Many factions made allegations on social media against the police for not arresting Rishad Badiuddin. Allegations were raised against the government, the Defence Secretary, Acting Inspector General of Police and the Criminal Investigation Department for various reasons. However, we as an institution that has upheld the law in the country for 154 years have fulfilled our responsibilities. So we were able to make the arrest. Some are questioning as to why this took 4 days. There are 22 million people in this country. There are many areas that need to be searched. Suspects tend to hide. That's natural. But it takes some time. Another 7 individuals who were suspect of harboring Rishad Badiuddin too have been arrested. 2 people were arrested in Kuliyapitiya yesterday. After extensively interrogating these 2 suspects, we were able to find information regarding the suspect in hiding. He has been hiding at a house in Kohuwala, Kalubowilla for the 2 days. It was after that he had moved to a location in Dehiwala on the 15th. There are groups including 7 suspects arrested related to this incident who aided in his attempt to evade arrest. There is a doctor among them. Her husband was also arrested. Moreover, a foreign employment agent who assisted the former minister to shift from the first house he was hiding at to the second location has also been arrested. He was arrested in Addala Chena. A person who identified himself as a secretary to the former minister was also present. Further investigations into the matter are being conducted by the Criminal Investigation Department.
මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපරාධ පරීක්ෂණ දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව තවදුරටත් පරීක්ෂණ පවත්වනවා.
හිටපු අමාත්‍ය සහ පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රී
The arrest of Rishad Badiuddin was not a sudden decision. In particular, 24 hours before giving the Attorney General's written instructions for this arrest to the officers of the CID and the Acting Inspector General of Police, the Attorney General summoned the officers of the CID and gave them verbal instructions.
වාචිකව උපදෙස් ලබා දීමක් සිදු කළා.
Venerable Jamburevela Chandraratna Thero filed a complaint at the CID, demanding that those who are hiding MP Rishad Badudin be prosecuted.
Although we find it hard to believe, we received word that he had been hiding in the house of a former minister in Mathura for a number of days. He may be released tomorrow. We believe that he would have handed himself in on Saturday. We thought he will remain in custody on Sunday, Monday and then get released on Tuesday. However, there was a problem in the plan and he surrendered today. So it is clear that all this is simply a performance. If this is not simply a drama, Badudin should be arrested and all those who supported him should be arrested as well. That is why we filed a complaint today. Why wasn't lawyer Uday Prabhat Gammampila arrested for making a public statement that Madhumadava Aravinda had been given protection? Then now is the time. He has also done something wrong by harboring someone that was wanted by the court. If the doctor who kept Badudin with him and his wife were arrested, then why is Gammampila not been arrested for harboring Madhumadava after he was wanted for 35 days?
Moving on from the reports of the arrest and subsequent remanding of former Minister Rishad Badudin, let's now take a look at the spread of COVID-19 in the country. 87 more patients linked to the Minuangoda cluster were identified today. The Department of Government Information stated this afternoon that the number of patients from the coronavirus cluster in Minuangoda has risen to 2,162. The epidemiology unit of the Ministry of Health stated that the total number of cases reported in the country has risen to 5,625. A total of 2,172 patients are receiving treatment at hospitals, while a total of 3,440 patients were discharged after making a full recovery.
Advanced level candidates in Gampaha test positive for COVID-19. It was revealed yesterday that a student sitting for the GC Advanced Level examination at a girls' school in Gampaha has contracted COVID-19. The student is currently at the IDH and is sitting for the GC Advanced Level examination while receiving treatment. Students in 8 classrooms who sat for the exam at the school where the infected student was discovered from have been transferred to another examination centre.
We assume that when hundreds of thousands of students attended, 1 or 2 of those students would contract the virus. Accordingly, the health and education authorities had made joint arrangements for the students who are identified as patients to sit for the examination without any hindrance. There was a report of another student in Kegol. She has not been infected with COVID-19 so far. The virus is only spreading among close contacts. This week is going to be very important. We are currently battling an unknown virus. So if you've been out of the house, always follow good health practices.
Several villagers in Matugama isolated. Investigations are underway to locate more contacts of identified COVID-19 patients in the isolated areas of Ovitigala, Badugama and the Badugama New Colony in Matugama. Kaluthura District Administrative Public Health Inspector Samangi Gaganage stated that 43 COVID-19 patients have been identified from the district so far. More than 2,000 families in the Kaluthura district have been quarantined. The education authorities have taken steps to provide GC advanced level candidates in the 3 isolated villages the opportunity to sit for the examination at special centres. COVID-19 patients from the Colombo Dockyard. 50 employees of the Colombo Dockyard have been directed for quarantine. This was after 5 employees of the Colombo Dockyard were diagnosed with COVID-19. The chairman of the Ports Authority, General Daya Ratnayaka, stated that the activities of the port are underway as usual. Status of the Katunayake Export Processing Zone. Secretary of the Sri Lanka Public Health Inspectors Association, Mahendra Balasuriya, stated that 212 people from the Katunayake Export Processing Zone have been diagnosed with COVID-19. By the 17th of this month, 2 factories in the area were closed as a result. What is happening in Ramukkana? The Ramukkana Samantagama area has been further isolated and PCR tests were carried out today. Travel restrictions to villages in Kuliyapitiya. Travel restrictions have been imposed on 2 villages in the Kuliyapitiya area, and a large number of people have been quarantined into 2 villages.
While around 7 cases relating to the Brandix factory have been reported, we have identified 4 patients who have contracted the virus, but we are unable to locate how they contracted it. There is an issue there.
MAS Holdings has issued a release stating that a few employees from high-risk areas has tested positive for COVID-19. The communique added that the infected employees are currently receiving treatment at state hospitals and contact tracing of close contacts of the infected employees is underway. The communique adds that all facilities in police curfew areas that have remained closed since the 4th of October will follow strict health guidelines prior to reopening. In addition to this, PCR testing has commenced at other operating locations of MAS. Are the coming 2 weeks decisive?
It will take about 14 days for us to decide whether a second wave is created through the first contacts or whether other clusters are created within the second wave. The coming 2 weeks are very decisive. The majority are asymptomatic. We propose these newly identified patients be divided into 3 categories. The first kind being asymptomatic patients. The virus in them will die down without even a paracetamol pill. The second category should have patients that show mild symptoms such as slight cough and sore throat. The third category are patients who suffer from excessive fever with cough, increased respiratory distress and fever. So we propose the government to provide services in those levels to lift the stress of the hospital systems. This way we will be able to solve the problems related to the capacity of the hospital system.
A debate has arisen regarding PCR tests. Recently, some who tested positive for the virus were later identified as negative. We say only 70% of those tests are correct, but if a test is confirmed as positive, it is positive unless the patient develops antibodies, and this complicates the balance between antibodies and the virus. Usually, if a positive test turns out to be negative the next day, we consider it as an error within the lab. A test report of a journalist from ITN turned out negative, although previously determined to be positive. Because we have received complaints that the journalist was determined as negative under political influence, the Health Ministry has a responsibility to clarify the confusion by submitting details of those who examined the positive test, who issued the result, and if someone influenced the outcome. If the journalist actually tested positive, or even if he developed antibodies and later tested negative, the journalist definitely has the capacity to spread the virus. In that case, Ministers Keheliya Nabukwella and Ramesh Patirana, who attended this media briefing, have to be considered close contacts and have to be quarantined under health regulations. We see now that the quality of laboratories have to be standardized and approved. With the recent incident at the LECO, a huge debate has sparked regarding irregular test results. We observe that there is a situation where tests come out as positive initially and then are retested and determined as negative. When the sample is being taken, if it is not received correctly through the nose and the throat, the virus might not be in the swab for the rest of the test. The second issue is there are around 30% of the patients who have the virus but show negative results. The other reason is that the patients might simply not have the virus in them. If a person tests positive, scientifically, he or she must be identified as a COVID-19 patient. However, if a person tests negative for the virus and has a contact history with a previously identified patient, we can't rule out that the person is not infected. That is why, although a person is tested negative or tested positive and has a contact history, we still subject them to a second PCR test.
It became negative because if not, those who attended the media briefing, including the ministers, will have to undergo quarantine and they will not have enough people to vote in favor of the 20th Amendment. That is why the journalists' positive test turned negative.
The intention of the government is to rally enough MPs around them in Parliament until the 20th Amendment is passed. Therefore, they plan on concealing the true information regardless of whether it is positive or negative. All they need is for the 2/3 majority of MPs to raise their hands in Parliament.
Newsfirst, Sri Lanka's most trusted news brand. keeps you informed wherever you are. All you need to do is follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. News First, your life, our news.
The Supreme Court's decision on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution will be submitted to Parliament tomorrow. The debate on the second reading of the draft amendment has been confirmed to take place on the 21st and 22nd of this month. Meanwhile, a massive or major opposition has arisen against the 20th Amendment. What is happening to the 20th Amendment? It will be presented to Parliament tomorrow, and depending on the response of the parliamentarians, further action regarding the amendment will be decided. Tomorrow, the legal decision regarding the amendment will be announced. Following that, we hope to commence the debate from the 21st onwards.
Chief Opposition Whip of Parliament Lakshman Kiriyalla has addressed a letter to the Speaker requesting the debate on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution be postponed. He pointed out that Parliament has to be limited under the new health guidelines recently introduced by the government. He also reminded the Speaker that the seating allocations of MPs in Parliament are in violation of the gazetted rules and it is illegal under the said regulations to hold Parliament. He further pointed out that it does not set a virtuous example for the country if the legislature of the country does not abide by the laws of the land. Lakshman Kiriyalla also requested the Speaker to take steps to postpone the debate regarding the 20th Amendment and to provide an opportunity to discuss the said facts at the upcoming parliamentary session held abiding by the given health guidelines.
So far, we participated in parliamentary sessions and debates. We did all that under health guidelines. This is complete politics. After the elections were called, they all went to court requesting the parliament to be convened. Then they didn't say any of this. In times more dire than this, we convened parliament and took decisions. Therefore, I clearly state that the bankrupt politicians headed by Lakshman Kiriyalla are attempting to close down parliament. We condemn the actions of these bankrupt politicians and they should not stoop so low.
Minister Vimal Veeravansa stated that the Cabinet has decided to make 3 more amendments to the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, taking into consideration the views expressed by a number of parties, including the Mahasangha.
Today at the Cabinet meeting, the Honourable President said, after considering various suggestions presented by the Mahasangha and other parties to add amendments to the 20th Amendment in addition to those presented to the courts, the clauses on audits will be preserved as it was in the 19th Amendment. Emergency acts will be limited to instances of national security and disaster situations. It must be said that emergency acts cannot be presented for the 20th Amendment with the current situation. In addition to these, the number of cabinet ministers will also be preserved as it was in the 19th Amendment. Accordingly, these progressive amendments were approved under the President's suggestions at the cabinet meeting.
අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලයේදී ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ යෝජනාවකට අනුව තීරණය වුණා 20 වෙනි සංශෝධනයට අදාළව ගෙන. 20 සම්මත වුණත් ඇමති මණ්ඩලය වැඩි වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. ඉතින් මම දැන් කිව්ව එක තේරුණා නම් තේරුම් ගන්න එපා. යා. විගණනයයි ඒ දිත්‍යපුර ස්භාවය සම්බන්ධයෙන්. ඔය තුන තමයි ඔය තුන.
The Venerable Professor Madhakoda Apethissatera led the National Intellectual Bhikkhu Forum today as they discussed the proposed constitutional amendment with the Prime Minister. I discussed this matter with the Prime Minister for over an hour today. As they mentioned that they will discuss and make a decision by this evening, we would like to very kindly remind them to remove these clauses and bring in the 20th Amendment. One of the issues is the urgent bills under discussion here. ETCA is a powerful bill that we talked about with India. Now, it can be taken up in Parliament and passed within 24 hours. Our people will lose the opportunity to go to court against it. The second thing we would like to mention is that institutional audits. Millennium Challenge Corporation, we talked about this continuously on the presidential platform as well as on the election platform. If these companies are removed from those with mandatory audits, one door will be opened for the MCC to come into our country. Then the dual citizenship matter will allow people like Arjun Mahendran, who plundered the country and left, to come in. Up to date, we have not been able to bring him to Sri Lanka. Therefore, in our country, we say not only entering politics, but also the Attorney General, the Governor of the Central Bank, the Inspector General of Police and other high-ranking officials should not be allowed the opportunity to obtain dual citizenship. We can't even imagine which country they are loyal to. We cannot say where this will end if the law restricting 30 cabinet ministers is abandoned. So I kindly remind you to remove everything that 19th Amendment brought in to weaken the state. But none of the four things that I have mentioned weaken the state. Those strengthen the state. Do not remove these things and create unnecessary burdens.
අනවශ්‍ය ප්‍රශ්න හදන්න එපා. ආණ්ඩුවේ විශාල මන්ත්‍රීන් ප්‍රමාණයක් අද උදේ
A large group of government MPs had discussion with us this morning. In fact, we did not say a single word against them, but we should pass the 20th Amendment after removing those shortcomings.
කරගෙන වෙනත් විදිහකින් කියනවා නම් රටට යහපත් වෙන කාරණා ටික ඉතුරු කරලා. අපි ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තියෙනවා ඒ වගේම ජනාධිපති
We have submitted. Also, the President sent those lawyers to meet us. We explained it to them. I think it will be amended. Passing the 20th Amendment is not the victory. It's about passing it with the support and love of the people. Otherwise, victory without the love of the people is a defeat.
ජනතාවගේ ආදරේ නැතුව මේක දිනුවත් පරාජයක්මයි.
Meanwhile, a copy of a letter regarding the 20th Amendment that was initially handed over to the President was handed over by Venerable L.A. Gunawansathero to the Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit. His Eminence the Cardinal made an important statement. I agree with our Thero's requests. Now it is up to the government.
ආණ්ඩුව කියන්නේ සංශෝධන සහිතව මේක ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා කියලානේ. ඒ සඳහා ඔබ වහන්සේලා එකඟ නැද්ද?
නෑ සංශෝධන කියලා බෑනේ සංශෝධන
It is not acceptable with amendments. They must show us the amendments. We are not satisfied if our statements are ignored. I would like to make clear to the government. I spoke fairly with the President over the phone regarding this. He explained his points to me. Some points are true. As the leader of the country, the President must have some power, but unlimited power cannot be given.
බෑ අසීමිත බලයක් දෙන්න බෑ.
ඉක්මනින්ම කඩෙනමින් මේක ඡන්දයක් තියලා අනුමත කරගන්න කියලා තමයි කියන්නේ.
බොහෝ දේවල් අනුමත කරගත්ත මේ රටේ හිටපු නායක.
Many things were passed by this country's past leaders, but when they tried to implement them, they failed. Best example, the 13th Amendment. So no one should try to play around with this country.
එක්ක කිසිම කෙනෙක් සෙල්ලම් කරන්න සූදානම් වෙන්න එපා කියන පරිවිඩේ.
ඔබ වහන්සේලා තරහ කරගෙන ආණ්ඩුවට ගමනක් යන්න පුළුවන් නේද?
ඒක අපිට වැඩක් නෑ. අපි බලන්න රටපැත්ත.
That is not relevant to us. We are only for those who care for the country. Otherwise, why should we consider? Meanwhile, a petition to the President was signed at the Abhayarama temple in Narayanpeta requesting that the 20th Amendment be repealed and a new constitution be drafted. Venerable Muruthettuwe Anandathera, members of the Mahasangha, trade union leaders and civil society representatives joined the program. If not, we ask that this be delayed or be thrown out. If the 20th Amendment is forced through, we would like to remind the government that they will face a huge challenge.
We
ask by presenting this that the voice of the Mahasangha, the working class and the Pancha Mahabalavega be heeded and this amendment be held and be brought in with amendments. And for now, the discussions be held and a new constitution that suits the country be introduced at a later date. Meanwhile, at a media briefing convened today by the Lekakadi Theras of the Malwatu Asgiriya Ubaya chapter of the Siam sect, he responded in this manner to questions by journalists on the 20th Amendment. We look forward to hearing and approving the recommendations of the committee appointed by the Prime Minister to amend the constitution in the best possible way. We also hope to adopt a long-term constitution that suits the country very soon. We request the government to take steps necessary for this.
මේ වන විට මහා සංඝරත්නයේත් බෞද්ධ ජනතාවගේත් ඒ වගේම විද්වතුන් අතරත් මේ පිළිබඳව නොයෙක්
At present, there is confusion among the Mahasangha, the Buddhist people, as well as the scholars about the result of this. Also, negatives about this are being discussed. Therefore, it should be remembered that the most important thing is to take the positives that are relevant to the welfare of the country, amend them or reject them, and work toward the well-being of all Sri Lankans. Our hope is to see a constitution that is good for the people. Meanwhile, the signing of an e-petition today began demanding the withdrawal of the 20th Amendment and the introduction of a new constitution instead. This was based on the initiative of the People's Movement for a Just Society. Many political parties are associated with this movement.
අපිට තේරුම් ගන්න අමාරුයි ඇයි මේ තරම් මේ රජයේ තියෙන හදිස්සිය. ලංකා ඉතිහාසයේ කවදාවත් ඇති නොවෙච්ච විදිහට පසුගියදා උත්තරීතර අධිකරණයේ දුන්න තීන්දුව කතානායකතුමාට යන්න ඉස්සර ජනාධිපතිතුමාට යන්න ඉස්සර අපි මාධ්‍ය හරහා දැක්කා.
It is difficult for us to understand why the government is in such a hurry. We have seen in the media the verdict given by the Supreme Court before the Speaker and the President saw it in a manner unprecedented in the history of Sri Lanka. We see this as an insult to Parliament. It is also an insult to the judiciary. Now the President ruled this country for 11 months under the 19th Amendment. The Prime Minister never said that these laws were not enough. There were no problems in the country. So in another 6 months, why can't these people bring in a new constitution that is promised to the people? The President can immediately summon these eminent members of the Mahasangha and seek their views on whether or not to proceed. We have to see that the Mahasangha can support us if a new constitution is brought directly. But we have no doubt that if a 20th Amendment is brought, we will not be able to bring in a new constitution.
නමුත් විශ්සගෙන આવොත් අපි නම් විශ්වාස කරන්නේ අලුත් ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් ගෙනයි. ඒ සැකේ අපතුරු තියෙනවා.
මම හිතන්නේ ඊයේ තිබුණ පාර්ලිමේන්තු මණ්ඩල රැස්වීමේදී අග්‍රාමාත්‍යවරයාගේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් ඒක තිබුණේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් ජනාධිපති කාර්යාලයේ ඒක වෙනස් කර අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමාගේ කාර්යාලය කළ ජනාධිපතිතුමා පැමිණෙන්නේ නැහැ අධිකරණ ඇමතිවරයා.
I think the Prime Minister chaired the parliamentary group meeting yesterday. It was headed by the President at the President's office. It was changed to the Prime Minister's office. The President did not come after that. The Minister of Justice did not come. The Prime Minister has said that the 20th Amendment will be passed with Muslim party support. Vimal Veeravansa has asked what is our situation then. He had been told that it would be MPs other than Rauf Hakim and Rishad Badiuddin, but Muslim MPs. Then his answer is, what will we do if their vote is on their own accord? In this way, all policies come to secure power. One policy destroys all the other policies in order to advance power. None of the 6 members of our Tamil Progressive Alliance will vote for the 20th Amendment.
News First, Sri Lanka's most trusted news brand, keeps you informed wherever you are. All you need to do is follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. News First, your life, our news.
This is ours. Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone. $517,000 square kilometers of beautiful open ocean. Our greatest resource. 8 times our landmass. This is the Sea of Sri Lanka.
With the US presidential election just around the corner, US President Donald Trump in Nevada yesterday said his rival Joe Biden will cancel Christmas if he wins in November. And with that, it's a wrap of primetime news on TV1 for the Newsfirst team. I'm Jaimal Ratnayaka, along with our sign language interpreter Brian De Cruz. Take care, stay safe, and good night.